This is Center Stage, putting your firm in the spotlight by highlighting business owners and other industry experts to help take your firm to the next level. Hey everyone, and welcome to Center Stage. I am your host, John Henson, and this week we are talking about something that I have actually wanted to cover for a long time now. I just have not been able to find the right person to do it, and I finally got somebody, finally found the right one, and we are talking about burnout. It is a huge issue, especially in the legal industry, but I think for a lot of business owners in general. You've likely heard the term, you've perhaps even dealt with it, or maybe you're dealing with it now. So I wanted to dedicate an episode to that this week. And joining us is someone who helps firm owners deal with this, they overcome it, along with just helping out in other areas of their firm's development. And that is Dina Cataldo. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here.
And I hope I said that right. I usually ask beforehand, is it Dina or is it Dinah?
No, you had it right. You were spot on.
Nailed it. All right. I know I got to that point and I had an internal freak out for a second. I was like, oh no, I forgot. But all right, good. I'm glad I got it right. That's awesome. So before we jump in though, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. I am a master certified coach for lawyers, and I help lawyers take control of their practice, find more fulfillment, and really create a life that they love. I was a criminal prosecutor for about 16 years before becoming a coach full time. And so I have experienced all of the things and learning how to build a business while working full time as a criminal prosecutor really challenged me. And I went through the whole burnout cycle even before I started building my business. So I have gone through it and I have come out the other side. So it is definitely possible for anyone listening who feels like they're going through burnout, they're getting those symptoms that it is possible for them to get out of it and to create a life they really enjoy.
Yeah. Also, and kind of a small follow-up to that. What does it mean to be master certified? I know several coaches out there, but you're the first one that I've come across that has that element to it. What does that mean?
Yeah. So I have been certified and master coach certified through the life coach school, which I think is like the Mercedes of life coach schools. I mean, that's my opinion and also the owner's opinion, but really it was an amazing experience just to be certified as a coach and to really understand how the brain works and how to, talk to anybody about any problem and really help them make decisions in a clear way. But what master certification really did was take everything that I was learning to the next level. So you might have heard things like, be responsible for your results. And you really start to, say, oh yeah, I totally know what that means. But master certification really forces you to put into practice the mindset coaching to the nth degree. And it really challenges you to manage your emotions around, tight goals and moving towards a goal. And so I learned so much about myself that you just can't learn in a regular certification program simply because you're learning the basics. So if you are master certified, when I see that, if it's through the life coach school, then they are getting that nth degree coaching where they really got to manage their brain around some challenges.
Got it. Awesome. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like you have the extra skill set and the extra resources available to really go the extra mile for the people that you work with. So talking about burnout, like you said, you dealt with it before when you were practicing. What, in your own words, what is it and what does it look like?
Well, for me and for the clients that I work with, it really feels like you have just hit the wall. Like you have been putting your foot on the gas for so long of a sports car, but you finally just run out of gas and you're just grinding the gears. It just feels horrible. Your whole body feels horrible. And a lot of the symptoms that we see of burnout is just procrastination, apathy. You throw your hands up in the air and you give up. Right? You're just I don't know. Or you just keep grinding the gears because you don't realize there's a different way to do things. That's where I was. I just didn't know there was a different way. I thought it was the job. I just thought, oh, there's something I'm just not doing right. And maybe I just need to work harder. But what I didn't realize is that mindset really put me in a place where I was just burning myself out further. I didn't know how to get out of it. So that's really what burnout feels like through my experience and what I've heard described through other lawyers that I've worked with, or like a train is constantly driving in their body. Like it just feels like anxiety. That's another sign that you're on your way to burnout.
Yeah. So, and one of the kind of connections I just made, because I think I see like a lot of symptoms of burnout, and, and like another one that a lot of people say is just like kind of losing that interest or passion or desire that they used to have. And so when I hear things like that, it almost sounds synonymous with depression. Are they similar? What is there any kind of like difference between the two?
Now, I'm not a medical professional, but I can tell you from my experience that I did have some like mild depression. It wasn't severe depression where I was being medicated, but I definitely felt disheartened. I felt kind of hopeless. It was just, I found myself, especially when I had started building a business prior to the coaching business I now own. I was experimenting with building a business because I knew that's the direction I wanted to take my life. And I was still working as a prosecutor. I was still doing trials, all of that. And I would find myself on the weekends thinking about my business, telling myself, I should be working right now. Why am I sitting on the couch, not doing anything? Like, I know I want to create this. Why am I not doing that? And I felt really hopeless. And what I noticed later on was that the way I was talking to myself, right? Because we all talk to ourselves. We just don't always notice how we're talking to ourselves, was horrible, right? And really taking the whip and cracking it, trying to pressure myself to work on the business, pressure myself to work on weekends and nights, thinking that I needed to drive myself harder. But what that was actually doing was resulting in procrastination. And of course, I just kind of entered this vicious circle where, the worse I talked to myself, the less the hopeful I felt. I felt depressed. I felt disheartened. I felt disappointed in myself. I felt some shame. And then, of course, I don't take any action to change anything because I feel so horrible. I don't want to do anything. And so what happens is you create the result of doing nothing. And then you just start the cycle over again, thinking I should be doing something. It's just this cycle that we need to break out of in how we talk to ourselves before we can start changing anything.
Yeah. And then the other thing you kind of mentioned there a couple of times is like the procrastination element of it. And is there like, because I also know a lot of people who are just natural procrastinators, and they say like, oh yeah, I really thrive when I have like one day to do something, even though I could have had it done 2 weeks ago and everything would have been fine. Is like, how is burnout procrastination different from people who may normally at least claim to operate that way?
So I will start with this. There's no such thing as a natural procrastinator. I know, right? There's people who are like, no, I've been procrastinating since I was 5. Like I just procrastinate on everything. It's like, let me just share something with you. Like this is the basic model of how our brain works. We have a thought about something, it creates a feeling. Okay. It could be excitement. It could be hopelessness. It could be shame. Then that feeling is either going to drive us to take action or it's going to drive us to not act, right? To procrastinate. And then that creates the result, right? And we just have to be aware of that. I used to think I was a natural procrastinator, so I get it. But what I learned is that there's actually no such thing. There's actually a person who either knows what they're thinking, how they're thinking, and how to change it, or somebody who doesn't. Like that's it. That's the difference. And in terms of burnout procrastination and like procrastinating, using deadlines really to pressure yourself, I would just take a step back for a moment, because if we are procrastinating and we're actually using deadlines to try to pressure us to work, that is one thing that will eventually lead us to burnout if we keep doing it. because what's happening is we are relying on adrenaline to pressure us to work. And it's something that is really normal when we think about it. Our brains are creatures of habits. Our brains are designed to seek pleasure, avoid pain, and conserve energy. And so to conserve energy and to survive, it thinks, okay, well, we've always done this thing in the past. We've pressured ourselves to hit deadlines in the past and it's worked. We've survived. But if we are telling ourselves, okay, our past is going to determine our future, we will never change. So we have to watch our brain. And if we're noticing that we're telling ourselves we're natural procrastinators, that that's just what we do, that's our past, that's all the evidence that I have, then you're just going to keep procrastinating and you're going to keep using deadlines to pressure yourself. And you can do that if you want. Like, people survive all the time doing that. But if you want to change and you don't like that, then get awareness of your brain and what it's doing and stop listening to it tell you the old story that that's just who you are, that's how you've always been, and just decide, okay, look, I see you, brain. You think that this is the way that it is, but we're going to start making some change. I mean, that's really where coaching comes in, because it is hard, right? You're teaching your brain a brand new skill to create a brand new habit, and habits take developing them and learning how to communicate with yourself differently. And that's something we're just not taught as kids, as adults, until we get to a point where we're like, what do I do? Like, we throw our hands up in the air and we're like, I can't stand this anymore. There's got to be a better way. And that's when we look for it.
Yeah. And you know, one of the wildest things that I kind of realized is it's really hard, and it's weird how your brain does this, because your brain controls everything in your body. And so it's almost like it can almost trick you into thinking, no, everything's fine. Like, we got this, it's under control. But you have to kind of wrangle it and, you know, get it under control yourself, and almost, you know, not trick yourself, but like, you have to work at making your brain do the things that you want it to do. I don't know, it's really hard to explain in this weird meta sort of thing. Like, you have to control the thing that controls you by default. Like, it's so hard to explain.
You know, the way I think about it is we have two voices in our head. Okay. We have the voice that has done what it's always done. It's the primal brain. It's the primal us. You could call it the ego, you know, whatever you want to call it. That's the part of ourselves that just wants to get by, right? It's just like, I just want to survive. Yeah. But then we have this higher part of ourselves, this part of ourselves that knows there's a better way, that knows that there's something more that we desire, that we want to create with our businesses, with our life. And we want to create that, but we're kind of being dragged down by this other voice, this ego voice. So if we start to really reconnect them, right? This is what I think about it, is like, okay, let's give voice to the higher self and start having that voice talk to our ego. And I'll just give a really simple example of this. Like, if you ever like wanted to go to the gym and you're like, no, like, there's part of you that really wants to go. You're like, this is going to be really good for me. And another part of you is like, no, I don't feel like it. Right? Those are the two voices. And so we have to start learning how to communicate. And one of the things that we can do is we can start making baby steps. So I'll tell myself something like, look, we're just going to put on the gym clothes. We don't have to go to the gym. We're just going to put on the clothes. Like, that's it. Right? Okay. Then you can get the ego brain on board. Okay, we'll just put on the clothes. That's fine. And then the higher self says, look, we're just going to get in the car. That's all. We're just going to get in the car. Not a big deal. And ego says, okay, I can get on board with just getting in the car. And then we say, okay, we're just going to drive to the gym. And we don't even have to go in. It's okay. We don't have to go inside if we don't want to. And the ego says, oh okay, we'll go. And then by the time you get to the gym, you're like, well, I'm here. I might as well go. So we can do that. So it takes practice, and we can do it with things that we have on our calendar that we don't want to do, and just start to break things down into tiny baby steps for our ego brain to start seeing like, it's okay. We could take that tiny little step.
Yeah. And it is so very simple like that. And I think, you know, I imagine it must be challenging for you, because, you know, you deal with a lot of lawyers, very smart. They know they're very smart. And so, like, surely these sorts of things can't be that simple, right? It's like there must be like some very complex solution to this rather than these baby steps. But it is interesting how that really works out. So I wanted to, like, what sort of things cause burnout in the first place? Like, you talked about the procrastination element of a little bit, but is it also just, I hear a lot about how people are having to work 50, 60, 70 hours a week. Does that lead into it? Is it just kind of like, is it almost a byproduct of being a lawyer and owning your own firm? Or is there a mindset issue that come into play? Like, what sorts of things have you seen that kind of lead to burnout taking place?
Okay. Before we talk about that, I did want to address, like, I'm so smart. Shouldn't I have figured this out already?
Mm-hmm.
like,
Yes,
like this
please.
seems really simple. I think that because lawyers think it's so simple, that they should just know it already and be able to do it, as if they should just be able to tell their brain to comply, because they have been working under that paradigm of pressure. Like, pressure works. If I just drive myself and work really hard, then the more I work, the more successful I'll be at anything. And I think that really prevents lawyers from even trying anything different, because they just think it should just work.
Yeah.
So that's where I think they kind of trip up. At least that's where I definitely tripped up, and what I hear from some of the clients that come to me. But in terms of what causes burnout, I don't think that being a lawyer, even though it has its inherent difficulties, that it can be something that will definitely lead to burnout. And here's why. Because there are tools available for them to begin changing how they work within their practice, so they're working fewer hours. And there's the first thing that I teach my clients, right, is to know that what they want matters, because so many of them think that all that matters is work. All that matters is the client. And I'm not saying that the client doesn't matter. We want to serve them to our highest ability, but not at our expense. So particularly for firm owners, it can be really tempting. It's tempting for me because I love working. I'm ambitious. I want to work. I'm very driven. And I have to have conversations with myself too about taking care of myself, stepping away, making sure I'm not working all the time, because I could, if I didn't watch my brain, I would.
Yeah.
But because I know that if I do that, I'm out of balance, I'm out of harmony with my life, and it feels horrible, I keep to my practices. I keep to my calendar. I prep a calendar every single week. And I think that a lot of lawyers are resistant to calendars because they think it's going to mean, there's a lack of freedom, or they think they can't use a calendar because they need to just jump in and start working. And what they don't realize is that a calendar is actually something that creates freedom. You actually, if you were thinking about, oh, well, when I was in law school, like, I knew exactly when I was going to class, and then I could just decide whether or not I wanted to go out that night. Like, I already knew what was happening. And you can do that every single week for yourself. And if you have an emergency, like I had something come up this morning. This morning I had my car battery died, but I had a calendar. So I was like, okay, well, what do I need to move? What needs to happen here? And I didn't freak out. It was just a matter of making some decisions, drama free. But because a lot of lawyers don't have calendars, they feel like when there's an emergency, they're just jumping from fire to fire to fire to fire, versus just making simple decisions about what needs to be prioritized. And so it doesn't have to be a 50 to 70 hour week for all the law firm owners out there. I have a client who went from 6 days a week in her practice to 4 days a week in her practice, and she increased her revenue. So it's about really thinking critically about where you're spending your time. Where are you wasting your time? Because there are so many wastes that show up, jumping from task to task, trying to multitask, which isn't even a thing, trying to answer all the questions as they come in, versus making some solid time for you to handle some projects. Like, if you're not handling your time, it's just going to manage you. You're just going to be running from fire to fire.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think, working with a coach or someone like that is really, really valuable, because, like, even if you think you have it all figured out and you know that you have good systems in place or whatever, it really can benefit you to just get an extra set of eyes on the things that you're doing and just give you a different perspective. At the very least, you'll walk away validated that you do have everything right. That's probably not going to end up being the case. Like, you'll probably walk away with some new ideas and some different ways to improve, but that's where that stuff really is valuable. So how, if someone is feeling burned out and, they've now just start hating getting up in the morning and going to work. They look at their task list and it's just all stress, no real eagerness to knock everything out. How does someone start to kind of overcome those feelings and get back to where they may have used to have been?
Yeah. I mean, the very first thing where I would start is just saying, look, however you're feeling right now is okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, there's nothing that's gone bad in your life. It's just a feeling that's happening, and it's okay. Like, you will be okay. I think us telling ourselves that we're going to be okay can be so calming in that moment, and to remind ourselves of that, because ultimately you are capable. Like, you know it. You've gone through law school. You've handled all kinds of problems in your life. You can handle this too. So just reminding ourselves that we can figure it out is a really big first step. And then from there, just like either ask for help or like take a step back and look at what's happening in your life. Like, really make it a priority to give yourself time. And one of the things that I needed to do is I needed to make time for myself to think. And so often we don't. So often we just this is what I did. I would wake up in the morning. I would hit snooze like 6 different times. I would like wake up all frazzled and like jump out of bed and run to the office. And I was like, this is not, I don't like how this feels. Like, this feels horrible. And so when I got to that point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is horrible. I just said, okay, look, I'm going to make myself into a morning person, period. Like, I'm going to figure it out. And I did it in a way that felt good to me and was very like, okay, I'm just going to go to sleep a little bit earlier and wake up a little bit earlier. And I'm going to play with this. Am I going to have time to have my coffee? I just need like some space to think. And once I created that little space to think, then I could start saying, okay, do I like how I'm spending my time? Like, when do I think best? Do I think best in the morning or in the evening? So why am I putting all this hard work on in the evening when it really needs to be handled in the morning? Because I think better. And why am I like not just closing my door? Why am I like at the beck and call of my phone and my email? Like, I need to be able to just say, all right, I'm going to check my email at certain times during the day. And maybe I'll leave it on, but I'm not going to let it run my life. I am going to choose what needs to get done first and start prioritizing. And it was just those little things that helped me start to move the dial enough so that I didn't feel so horrible.
Yeah. Well, and I wonder, because I think a lot of, especially the entrepreneurial minded people, I wonder if they almost see their work and their firm as like a core part of their identity.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so how do you separate, your work from like your own self and actually try to focus on yourself and put yourself first?
Yeah, I experienced this as a criminal prosecutor. I very much identified myself as a DA, so I totally get it. There's a certain amount of respect you receive, as a lawyer who has your own firm, or as a titled, right, like a
Mm-hmm.
DA.
Yeah.
When I walk into a room and I tell somebody what I do, they're like, "Whoa, wow, that's so cool. What do you?"
Yeah.
Even if you don't think it's cool at all, other people think it's so fascinating and like, oh, wow, you're a lawyer. And so you've got like this kind of glow around you. If you're a lawyer, your life must be perfect if you're a lawyer, right? So we really start to buy into this image of us as a certain kind of person.
Yeah.
And so I had a difficult time separating this, because I was going to be a life coach. Like, who the heck leaves being a criminal prosecutor to be a life coach? Like, nobody's like, ooh, a life coach. Like, what? What?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Right. So I really had to be confident in myself. I had to grow confidence around what I wanted mattered. Like, that was really the thought I needed to believe, is like, what I want matters. And I find that with my clients too, to separate themselves from this identity of I'm only a law firm owner. It's like, I am a person who wants things, and that's okay. And I'm allowed to have them, right? I'm allowed to have a cup of coffee in the morning without thinking about work. I'm allowed to go on walks. I'm allowed to just like take vacation. I'm allowed to not answer the phone. Like, I'm allowed to ask for what I want. It's so simple, but we don't think it consciously enough. And so when I just started saying that to myself, and when I really started believing it, is when what other people thought about me didn't matter. Right. And that's really hard. I mean, we're
Yeah.
taught to care about what other people think about us. I mean, I still care about what other people think about me, but I don't let it stop me from doing what I want to do. And that can be really, really hard when everybody, we tell ourselves that our client needs us. They need us to be available all the time. Like, that's why they want us to be there. They don't need you to be there all the time. They just want you to solve their problem.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you can't take vacation. They just want to know you can solve their problem.
Right. Yeah. And, and to me, at least on the outside looking in, like that's an easy solve, right? Like you can just set expectations up front and let them and like do the one thing that a lot of law firms are heavily criticized for, and then just stay in touch, like keep them
Right.
updated, and set those expectations like that. And so like, I mentioned this on a couple episodes back, but like so many problems and issues that I think a lot of people get paralyzed by truly do have very simple solutions. And it's just, and I know so many, lawyers and the ones that own businesses, they're very logical, very analytical, and they can get paralyzed by all of that analysis and, almost just kind of default to, well, this is just how it is. I can't possibly make a decision on what to change, because then that raises, three other questions that I have to answer. And so it's just, I might as well just stay on this same path.
Yeah, I see that a lot. Like, this is the work that I really do with my clients, is show them. Sometimes it's really obvious. So I'll give you an example. Like, an estate planning attorney, like I have multiple estate planning attorneys that I work with, and they all have said basically the same thing, which is they tell their new clients, oh, I'll have those documents to you in 2 weeks, right? But they're packed. Like, they've got so many cases, like people keep coming to them, and they just keep saying 2 weeks, right? And so one day I would say to them, like, okay, so how's your calendar looking? It's totally full. Okay, what are you telling your clients 2 weeks out? Why are you telling them that? And, one attorney said, oh, well, it just sounds reasonable to me. Like, 2 weeks just sounds reasonable. And I said, reasonable to who? Well, I think that the client probably thinks that that's a reasonable amount of time. And I said, well, is that an amount of time where you're not going to be killing yourself to get the documents done? Like, you're not going to be staying up late. You're not going to be like, doing work on weekends. And she said, well, no. And I said, well, why don't you just tell the client up front, like 3 weeks or 4 weeks or, however much time you want? And it had never crossed their mind that that was something that they could do. And it felt really scary because it was new. They didn't want to disappoint their client. They felt like maybe the client would think they're not doing a good job. They would think like maybe the client would go elsewhere. But once we did the work on just letting it be okay that they ask for what they want and just say, hey, is 4 weeks okay? They did it and it was fine. The clients were like, no problem. And of course, if there's an emergency, you can choose to do that sooner. But why not just say 4 weeks when it's really not an emergency?
Right. Yeah. And it's also one of those things, there's an opportunity there to kind of surprise and delight. You say, oh, it could be 4 to 6 weeks. And then, you get your systems in place and now you have it done in 3 weeks. And,
yes,
and then so many opportunities can lead beyond that, because now you've created a raving fan, more referrals, blah, blah, blah. You've heard me say that a bunch of times before. So all of this is really great. But I think for me, the big takeaway though, is, you have to get to a point where you have to allow yourself to be vulnerable and ask for that help. Like I can have all of the lawyer coaches on this podcast and we can all tell these same things over and over again, but it's up to you as the listener out there to make that first step and reach out. And I think that's where people like Dina are really, really valuable, because they can give you that perspective. They can give you those ideas that you may not have otherwise thought yourself, and they can cheer you on and coach you and push you to make those decisions to put you in a better place.
I agree. And I'll also just share, coaches aren't there to tell you what to do. They're not there to be like the taskmaster. They're there to help you make the best decisions for yourself and the ones that you want, that you think are best for your life and your practice. So it's not like you have like a taskmaster looking over your shoulder. It's somebody who is really going to help you communicate the best that you can with yourself so that you can make the best decisions possible for yourself.
Right. Yeah. And it's, I don't, this is kind of what my mindset used to be, where it's like, I forgot that I was an adult and I could make my own decisions. And I was still kind of operating under this, sort of mindset that, like, from back when I was a kid, where it's like, no, I have to do what everyone tells me to do. And it's like, no, like, you're an adult. Like, you can, like, you don't have to do what people tell you to do or suggest you to do. Like, yeah.
Right. And I think there's a huge gap that we need to fill. And I think coaches fill, because in society, we are taught to just follow the rules and do what other people tell us, right? Like, get the A+, go to school, make sure that you're home by such and such time, right? Like, all of these rules are set out for us. And so when even if you go into a firm, like a regular firm where you're not the owner, there are all these rules set. You can do these things. There's all these socialized rules, like make sure that you're being seen by the boss, staying at the office late, but when you become a law firm owner, you get to change the rules. And I see so many law firm owners take all of the rules from childhood and from those firms and bring it into their law practice, their own law practice, because they just haven't looked at them. I had one client who used to hate, like, she was working in the firm, that she felt like she had to stay late so that the upper level bosses would see her working. And she found that she brought that into her firm when she had employees, and she would stay late so that the employee would see, quote unquote, what it looks like to work, right? And she hated that about her old job, but she brought it into her firm. So we just have to be aware that our brain has picked up all of these old habits and they're bringing them into our life, whether it is a tendency to use pressure to hit your deadlines, whether it is your old firm habits into your new firm. And you just have to think critically about them and start really asking yourself, is that what I want?
Yeah, absolutely. So wrapping up here, tell everyone how they can get in touch with you and, where they can go and learn more about what you do.
Yeah, sure. So I have a podcast called Be a Better Lawyer Podcast. I also have the Busy Lawyer's Ultimate Time Management Guide. So if they want to download that, and there's also a video training that goes with that, they can get that at dinacataldo.com/busy lawyer. And if they want to learn more about working with me, they can always book a strategy session on my website at dinacataldo.com.
Awesome. And I'll make sure that URL is in the show notes. One final question for you before we close things out here. If you had one final piece of advice for our audience, what would it be?
Be kind to yourself. We really tend to be hard on ourselves, and that is really common with us type A folk. But honestly, you're doing a great job. Just be kind to yourself.
Love it. Yeah. Great note to end on there. And that's going to do it for us this week here. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Again, if you have not done so yet, please leave a rating and review wherever you are listening. It really does help the show out. But that's it. Dina, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. To learn more, go to spotlightbranding.com/center stage.